In this lecture, I will talk about the VTP Client Mode. So here we have this topology that we will use in this lecture, where we have a main site or the headquarter site with two switches configured as VTP servers, and we have three VLANs configured here: VLAN 1, 2, and 3. And we have three branches with two switches in each. One is configured as a server, and the other is configured as a VTP client. And in the first branch we have VLANs 1, 10, 20, and 30. In the second branch we have VLANs 1, 40, 50, and 60. And finally, in the third branch we have VLANs 1, 70, 80, and 90. So, as we know that a switch in the client mode cannot add or remove VLANs, so we cannot configure new VLANs or change VLAN configuration through the client mode or using the client mode. So, for example, in this switch, if I issue the command show VLAN VTP status, we see that this switch is configured as a client with a domain name of Cisco, and we see that we have VLANs 10, 20, and 30 configured on the switch. If I now try to add a new VLAN, let us say VLAN 100, we see that we are not allowed to do this in client mode. And also, if I try to remove a VLAN, so for example no VLAN 10, we see also the same message. But the thing that some of CCNA students are confused about or do not know about is that the switch in the VTP client mode can propagate VLANs. So what does that mean? Now, if we go to the server switch here and issue the command do show VTP status, we see that we have this switch configured as a server. And if I issue the command show VLAN brief, we see that VLANs 1, 2, and 3 are configured here. And for the VTP, we see that the configuration revision number is 2, and on the client switch in the branch site, we see that the configuration revision number is configured or is set now as 3. Now, what will happen if we move the client switch from this branch to the main site? Let us do that now. So I will cut the connection here and then move the switch and then connect it to the switch here, and then fast forward time so that the trunk will work. Now I go to the switch 3 and issue the command do show VLAN brief. We see that it has the same VLANs as before, 10 and 20 and 30. But on the server switch, if I issue the command show VLAN brief, we will see that it does not have VLANs 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3, but now it has VLANs 1, 10, 20, and 30. So this means that switch 3 overwrote the configuration of the client switch overrode the configuration of the server switch, because the client switch here has a revision number of 3, but the server switch was before has a revision number, configuration revision number of 2. So the one with the higher configuration revision number will take precedence and will overwrite the configuration of the other, although this one is a client and this is a server. So for a switch being a client, it does not mean that it will not overwrite the configuration of other switches if it has a higher configuration revision number. It cannot we cannot add or remove VLANs on the switch, but if it has VLANs configured before and it has higher configuration revision number, then it will override the configuration of other switches, even if they are servers. So here we have this problem when we moved the switch from the branch to the main site. A problem happened and all the configuration of the server switches changed to be with the same configuration of the client switch. So this is a problem of VTP. So we should be very careful when dealing with VTP because of issues like this. So what should we do when we move switches from a site to site, and so that this issue will not happen? We have to reset the configuration revision number before moving any switch from a site or introduce a new switch into our site. We have to reset the configuration revision number, and we have two ways for doing this. If I go now to this switch and issue the command do show VTP status, we see that we have a configuration revision number of 3 and a domain name of Cisco. If we issue the command do show VLAN brief, we see that we have VLANs 40, 50 and 60. Now to reset the configuration revision number, the first way is by changing the VTP domain name. So VTP domain, let us make it as CCNA, and then we have to cut the connection here so that when we change the domain back to Cisco, it will not take its configuration from this switch. So now I will change the domain name back to be Cisco, and then I will issue the command do show VTP status. We see that the configuration revision number is now 0, and for the VLANs we see that we have the same VLANs. Now if we move the switch to the main site and connect it to the other switches, and then fast forward time, if we go to the switch and then do show VLAN brief, we see that the client switch this time took its configuration from the other switches. So on the server switch, if you issue the command show VLAN brief, we see that its configuration is the same with the VLANs 10, 20 and 30. So this is the first way of solving the issue, which is by changing the VTP domain name so that the configuration revision number will be reset. Now let us use the second way on this switch. The second way is by changing the VTP mode to be transparent, and let us first check by using the show VTP status. We see that the configuration revision number here is 3, and the mode is client and the domain is Cisco, and the VLANs configured here are VLANs 70, 80 and 90. Let us now change the VTP mode to be transparent and then issue the command show VTP status. Now we see that the configuration revision number is changed to be 0, while we have the same VLANs configured. Now if we just do the same thing that we have done before. So I will move the switch to the main site and then connect it to the other switches, and then fast forward time. Now on the switch, if I issue the command show VLAN brief, we see that it has its same VLANs as before because it is transparent, and I have to change it now again to be client. Now if I show the command show VLAN brief, we see that it took its VLAN configuration from the server switch, so and the server switch retains its VLANs of 10 and 20 and 30. So as a conclusion, we can say that client switches in client VTP client switches, we cannot change the VLAN configuration, so by adding or removing VLANs, but it propagates its configuration, its VLAN configuration, and can overwrite other switches, and we have to be very careful with that. And before moving a switch from a site to site, we have to reset the configuration revision number, either by changing the VTP domain name or by changing the VTP mode to be transparent.